let me start. My name is Lee Ford. I'm a solution architect for a company called Simity in the UK. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Office development, and I mainly work in Microsoft Teams, hence obviously being on this meeting now. And I generally work around deploying Teams into enterprise and setting up sort of custom solutions and that sort of thing, really. So today I'm going to talk about creating an approval process for new teams. I watched Faiza's session a few hours ago. Not 100% the same, but not kind of get the end result, I guess, is similar. So it's kind of a different approach to that, really, which hopefully some of you guys will find useful. So I'll get started, and let's just move on. So why create an approval process is probably the first question that we should be asking. In default, all users within an organization can create their own teams, add members into the teams, create channels, all that good stuff. However, we do get a lot of people ask, well, can we stop that? Can we stop having the ability to create teams? It's unmanageable. We want to be able to control the process and only sort of awards teams or create teams for people that that should be creating them and manage the process. And one of the ways of doing that is effectively by disabling the ability for users to create Office 365 groups. Now, there are other services that rely on those as well, things like Planner and Exchange and all the bits like that. So it's not just Teams is affected by changing that policy, but ultimately people do ask for that. And typically it's not because they don't want users to use Teams and collaborate, it's just they want to manage it. So that's just the sort of the key functionality. We're not trying to take away the ability for users to use Teams within Teams. It's just kind of managing it. So the reasons we're generally given for that are avoiding creating unnecessary teams. Maybe there's already a team for that particular purpose and they weren't aware of it, or maybe it was a private team so they haven't been invited, they've been missed off the list, and it's just to avoid duplication, unnecessary teams, and also people creating teams with names that might be offensive or impersonating another team, or generally nefarious. So it's kind of just being able to manage that whole process, really. So when designing an approval process, obviously this is just one that I've designed, or this is the one I've kind of drawn out. It's not the only way to do it. There's lots of different ways, there's lots of different processes. This is just mine, so I thought I'd sort of highlight that this isn't the only way to do it. And fundamentally, it is a mechanism for the way for users to be able to request a team, specify some settings or customization around that team, and then go submit the request to the team that approves the request, of the approval board or whatever you want to call them, whoever's in charge of granting or denying the requests. And when deciding to come up with the process, I kind of outlined some things that I would, if I was using it to request teams, that I would like, or sort of nice to haves, really. And the first one for me is that it needs to be easy to use. If you want to drive people to using Teams as a collaboration tool, but then at the same time you're stopping them from creating teams, then you need to make it really, really easy for them to request them, so at least they can get those teams up and running pretty quickly. And what I've blogged about in the post and talked about in the past, should I say blog post and talked about in the past, is creating a form or a web page to go to request it, and then having the user kind of have to go out of Teams to request a team is a bit alien. It does work, and there are other ways, and the session earlier on I outlined how you can do that, and it was absolutely same thing here. I want it to be within Teams. You don't want users having to dip out into different apps to get what they want. And I want them to be able to customize not just I want a team and this is the team name. I want them to be able to add members and channels and the visibility of the team, and also provide a justification for the team so that whoever's doing the approval process can see why that they're requesting that team and getting, and rather than just kind of saying I want this team without really any context to it. And another thing is keeping the user informed. What you don't want to do is just allow them to submit something and then either forget about it or not know where it is. And the idea here is that they will be notified that their request has been received, and then they will also be notified on the outcome of their request either way. So with that in mind, I've kind of done a quick and dirty flow chart. It's very, very basic, but effectively the user requests a team, the request is sent for approval, and that request is either approved or denied. And if it's approved, the team is created and the user is notified that the team is ready to use. And if it's denied, the user gets a notification that it's been denied and a rejection reason. Okay. So if we go down a little more detail on the solution that I've going to be talking about today, is it comprises of two parts. You've got a personal app within Teams that's kind of pinned to the left to the app bar, just so it's sort of front and center within Teams, that allows, you know, someone, if I want to request a team, they haven't got to find a particular team or search for it, or it's literally just on the left hand side, you can't miss it. And that allows the user to request a team within Teams. And then the second part is the Power Automate, or the flow, that does all the heavy lifting. And you know, Power Automate is great for this. You could write your own script, or you could write your own tool to do this as well, or, you know, lots of different ways of doing it. I've chosen Power Automate, one, because it's easy to get up and running, and two, it's easy to walk through on a call like today. So effectively, that's what we have here. We have a request, and then similar, we've got an approval or a denied decision, and then the team is created using Graph, and either way, the user notified via an instant message. So that's enough talking. I will switch over to my desktop and we will have a look at the solution. So first thing is we've got two Teams windows here within the same tenant. The one on the left is the user, and the one on the right is the admin that will be effectively making the decision on the team request. And I'll put them side by side so it's a bit easier to kind of see the flow of the solution rather than kind of flicking between windows. So as you can see, I've got an app here, still using the default app icon that you get when you're creating a Teams app. I haven't got to the point to customizing it too much. And effectively, you can kind of flick between and create, and you'll just have effectively a form to complete. And this form will just allow you to request a team, basically. So you can see I've tested it today. But if I start typing something, I could type sales team. Now it will tell me, because I've already created a sales team earlier on, but I can't use that team name. So let's just go with another one. Let's go with back. And we'll create it as a private team, so it's not publicly searchable within the Teams directory. And then I need to pick my members in addition to me. So it's additional team members in addition to me. It's a given that you'll be part of the team. So if I just pick another user, and Diego will be on that team with me, and I could select multiple if I wanted to. And then I need to provide a justification for it. So if I say team for office, and then I want to create a second channel, let's say, and I can determine whether that's going to be a private or a standard channel. So if I create a standard channel, standard, description. And then if I create a private one too, and then effectively I'm requesting, and that's effectively the request form. So I'm determined that what name I want to call it, description, the visibility of the team, any members that I want to add to that team, justification, and then I've specified 2 channels that I want to add in addition to the general channel within a team. And if I click request, fingers crossed this works. It's always live demo, so who knows? I should be able to request, confirm that request, and I hit confirm. I should hopefully get a message at some point come in here from Flow saying that your request has been received and will be processed. So at that point, we know it's gone from the Teams app and it's hit the Flow. So that's kind of a key thing to know that it's actually gone. And at the same time, I've now got a request come into the Teams request team. Obviously, you could call it whatever you want, but that's what I've chosen. And the same information that I put in the form is now available. So I can see all the information that that I've put in that form is available. So I have the name, the description, the visibility, also the members, and also that I want a private channel, including what type. So I'm going, actually, I don't think that user should have private channels, or yes, they're okay to have them. And so I wanted to get all the information on that adaptive card so you can make an informed decision. So in this case, I'm going to approve it. So now that has been approved, and you can see that I've responded to it with and the name is kept. So at least if you're going back before, you can see who handled the request. So now, hopefully, fingers crossed, Graph is doing its magic, and it's not throwing loads of errors for me. And we should have a team appear at some point within the teams on the left-hand side. And also I should get a notification to say that the team has been created. So this does take a few seconds because it's not only having to create the team, it's having to create the channels and a few other bits. Okay, so I've got a notification that it has been approved by Dell, and it should be available for using Teams. So now if I go to Teams, I should have back office, and I do. So if I go into general, see the members have been added to the team. I can see I have a private channel, which is what I requested, and also have the standard channel there as well. And effectively, that is the process in a nutshell. Now, I'll quickly show you the decline process, but it's a very similar one. So if I just call it, with the accounts team, I don't think I think I deleted that one. Let's just do that quickly. Which picks some random person, and we'll create another standard channel just to flash it out. So now if I do that request, we should get another request through on here. And as you can see now, I have a request that's come through, and in this scenario, the request doesn't meet whatever criteria that's been determined, and we want to decline that meeting request. And so now I can put no thank you and decline it. Okay, so now I should get a notification that request has been, well, one, it was received, and then obviously shortly afterwards it was then also declined, and the reason was given. So obviously it's not the fanciest of adaptive cards that I'm working with here. I've kind of, it's bare minimum really, I suppose, to get it up and running. You could obviously flesh this out and add maybe pictures of the user that's requesting and all that extra good stuff, but ultimately here it's just kind of outlining a process. So that's the solution in a nutshell, and I think what I'll move on to now is kind of just walking it through a little bit more detail. and we'll start off with the application. So let me just bring up my VS Code. And effectively what we have is a Teams app created in, let me just move that out of the way, created in using the Yeoman Teams generator. And then within there we have a single sign-on. So what's happening here is that we are running a get AAD auth token, and effectively what that's doing is getting a token from Teams to determine who is signed into Teams, and then from there, then we can also exchange that token. So if I go down to the bottom, so we've got the token. I'm effectively getting an auth token from Teams, and then with that, if it's successful, then I'm exchanging that token. That's in here. I'm exchanging that token for a graph token, and effectively, what I'm doing is I'm sending that off to the back end of this app, which is effectively a web service. It's Node in this case, and that's effectively sending a graph request to graph, and then it's returning a token to my application to effectively mean that I can then run graph calls against with this application effectively. And what I am doing then is querying. If I go up here, I'm querying users. Well, actually, I'm querying myself just to determine who I am and what my email address is and all that, which I then embed in the request that goes out to the flow to know who's actually made that request. Obviously, listing the users so that they can select them on drop down, and also listing existing teams. And the reason for that is that when you're searching for a team, you can then determine whether that team has already been used or not, because what you don't do is end up with duplicate name teams. That's going to get confusing for users. And that's kind of the basis. And I won't go into too much detail, but effectively we have the form, and then once the form's submitted, it obviously depends on what you're doing within the form. It then gets posted to Flow, and that's effectively in here. We have the where it's posted, and actually it's not really Flow. I'm using Logic Apps, which is the Azure version of Flow, and the only reason for that is just because I have credit that I can use rather than paying for the expensive HTTP premium connector. And that's ultimately the reason I'm doing it. So if I now move over to the Flow or the Logic app, it's whatever you want to call it, we have that in here, and I'll quickly walk through what we've done. So if I look at the one that we submitted about 7 or 8 minutes ago, we can see that there's a fair amount to it, but we'll quickly walk through it. It's not too complex. Effectively, we can see the inputs that were provided to the Logic app, and we can see that the team name and the visibility and the members, justification and the channels, and also the request, i.e. me, the person within the app that sent the request. And that all that information is gathered from Graph and then obviously populated in the form and then posted out to this Logic app. And then with that information, we can then firstly notify the user that's made the request and just say, look, yes, we've received the request. So they at least know that it's been delivered. And that's obviously using the requester's email address. And then we're effectively populating the client ID and the tenant ID of the Azure AD application that has permissions to create teams, and we'll cover those off in a minute. And effectively, that's kind of connecting to Graph. And what we're also doing is creating a list of channel names and a list of member names for the adaptive card, because they are effectively an object, and it's kind of putting them into a more reader-friendly format, really. So once we've kind of run through all the members and the channels and join the names up in a more human readable way. So if we look here, that then appears like that, which is much easier to read on an adaptive card, and similarly with the names, it kind of just looks a bit easier to read on an adaptive card. We then send the request out to the team, and effectively what we're saying here is that if I just view this, we're sending this out. We're effectively saying, yeah, can this should this, it's not the most readable, but effectively we're sending out that adaptive card, and then that adaptive card is sent out, and then dependent on the condition, whether it's true or false, determines what happens with that request. And obviously, so here we have it was successful, i.e. it was approved, and in that case we're then posting to graph on the Teams beta, because there isn't a 1.0 for Teams yet, for creating teams. We're posting a beta Teams create request. We're adding the requester as an owner, and then we are creating specifying the visibility. And then what I tend to do, even though it should wait until this is finished, if it does a 202 with a location in, and then the logic app will then poll this location once the operation's finished. I still wait 15 seconds just to know that the team is properly created and it's not going to error on the next steps. And effectively what I have here is I wait 15 seconds, then I get the new team ID from this location header to determine what team's just been created. And then I then go through and add each member and each channel to the team. And that's done on an until. So if there is any errors, if there is a 404, something like that, because the team technically has just been created and it didn't exist, then it gives us time to wait for the team to be created, and it kind of tries and tries and tries. Once that team's been created, once the members have been created, once the channels have been created, then we then send an approved message to the user to say, yeah, that team's been created, we haven't had any errors, all good. And there we go. And ultimately, we quickly look at the run history for the deny. Then effectively it's a very similar process we're going through, just effectively creating the adaptive card here. At this point we haven't created any teams or anything, we're kind of just formatting the adaptive card to be sent out, and at that point the condition is false, so there's no further actions to be done other than just to send a decline message with the reason that it was declined. And that effectively is the logic either way, really. So that's kind of the app in a nutshell. That's also the logic app in a nutshell. And then what we also need to have is the Azure AD applications, which effectively give us the permissions to do both of those together. So if I quickly find my window, where's it gone? This one. And if I just got the applications, it runs on 2 applications, and the reason there's 2 applications in the solution is we have the teams requests. That's someone requesting the team, and that is done on application, on user-based or delegated permissions. So effectively, what that means is that it's being requested as on behalf of a user, not being requested by an application, i.e. a script. So if we look in here, these are all delegated permissions, i.e. it requires a user to be requesting these permissions rather than a script. And effectively, most of these are fairly default. effectively we're reading all groups. So, you know, and the reason for that is that we can then request all teams to be listed back to the app, so we know if a team's in use or not, or team has already been created with that name, should I say, and also listing users so that we know we've got a list of users to populate and add to the team. And this one is a little bit more nuanced than just assigning the permissions. We do have to set up exposing APIs, and effectively what I have here is my ngrok that I'm running the app on. Typically, if this was production, you would put that in, you know, Azure or somewhere else, and that would be populated there. But obviously, for development, it makes sense to use ngrok and obviously host it on my own machine. And effectively, this allows me then to request from teams, and the client applications are the team's web app and the team's desktop app that allow the request to take place. And I think that's it for this one. I think that is all that's set up. And then the create a team Azure AD application effectively is just a ability to read users and also create groups, i.e. teams, that allow us then to create the team and add members and things like that. So there is a group.create permission, but obviously that only lets us create the group. It doesn't actually let us add members and modify the team afterwards. So effectively what we're doing here is by granting this is allowing us to do that. And effectively, I think that is actually, I think I've probably raced through this a bit too quickly, because I was normally timing myself at about 35 minutes. So I do apologize if I have run through too quickly. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or anything like that. I'm kind of explained everything really, but it's not 40 minutes, so saved us some time. Any questions on anything? I can maybe do another example if people missed that sort of the run through on the first time. Okay, I think we're probably good then. So I will stop there, I think, unless there's anything else. I will just quickly go back to my PowerPoint, and just to say that I plan on publishing this in GitHub soon. There's a couple of quirks or things that I want to sort of iron out before I do publish it, to make sure that, you know, it's the best it can be. So I do plan on releasing that hopefully in the next few days. But just obviously the way the world is at the moment, I ran out of time on publishing it in time for this session. So I do apologize. And with that, it's just, if you could rate this session and any other session, and obviously within, you know, in the next half an hour, join the keynotes, and obviously, yeah, share your voice on Twitter using the Teams Fest keynote, and that's it really. Okay, so I've got a question in the chat about why I'm using Logic Apps. Ultimately, there's no real reason from a, you know, this solution would work in Logic Apps or in Flow. There's no real reason either way in that scenario. It purely comes down to that to use effectively to create this flow in Power Automate or Flow, you have to have a premium subscription, which can work out quite expensive, especially if it's not a particularly heavily used flow. So what I've tended to use is Logic Apps, and the reason for that is that you pay per use. So if it's if it's not used that often, it actually works out fairly cheap. And if I was to just share my Logic App again and look at it in here, effectively it's the same once you open it up in if I edit it, it looks just like Flow. There's no real difference really, and the costs are, I think this has cost me, I've done quite a few runs, sort of tweaking it and such, and it's cost me like 15p, I think, the last time I looked. So it's comes across, it's basically down to cost. Which of the users will need what license if they're using your app? So they don't really need any particular license other than just the ability to be able to use Teams. That's ultimately the only license that's needed. So as long as someone can sign into Teams, which they'd need to be able to do to request the app, that is it really. There's no additional cost. There's no flow cost. It's purely just, in this scenario, the Logic app, and also the hosting of the web app that sits within Teams for the Teams request, which again is not terribly expensive. If you host that in Azure, or if you've already got your own hosting provider or solution, it's fairly lightweight. It's not going to be expensive, especially in the grand scheme of things, and how much other user licensing costs. It's minimal. Okay, I'll hang on. I'm happy to hang on for a couple more minutes just in case there's any more questions. Otherwise, I think I've probably covered everything off. Okay. Well, thanks for everyone's time, and hope you found it useful. And do remember to submit your feedback to this session and all other sessions. And have a good day. Thank you.